Joining me now, Rachel Maddow, host of The Rachel Maddow Show, Joy Reid, host of The ReidOut on MSNBC. We were speaking before the speech, and we got to see it. Rachel, your thoughts?
This is a damn good speech. This strikes me as essentially the bookend to her Democratic National Convention speech. Her acceptance of the Democratic Party's nomination hit some of these same lines, but she knew she was speaking to the Democratic Party and to those who had elevated her within that party. Tonight, she was speaking to the whole country. She overtly asked for people's vote. She overtly reintroduced herself to the country. She said, I know a lot of people say they don't know enough about me. I'm paraphrasing, but she talked about her upbringing. She talked about having worked most of her career outside of Washington. And she ended with a big presidential flourish, a big presidential vision. Nearly 250 years ago, America was born when we wrested freedom from a petty tyrant. Across the generations, Americans have preserved that freedom and expanded it, and in so doing, proved to the world that a government of, by, and for the people is strong and can endure. The United States of America, she said, is not a vessel for the schemes of wannabe dictators. The United States of America is the greatest idea humanity ever devised. She is not speaking to people who already support her there. She is speaking to people who may not have been inclined to vote for her, who may not have felt comfortable with her, who may not have felt like it was a worthy cause to get up off the couch and go vote for anybody. She's there to say, listen, I embody the future of this country, and the other guy embodies the end of the American democratic experiment. And it's worth voting for me because I will protect this country. And that is strength personified. She did a very good job delivering this speech, and I think it was probably the most important speech of her life thus far.
Joy.
Indeed. She said it is time to turn the page on the drama and the conflict, the fear and the division. It's time to turn the page to a new vision for America. I wrote that line down as well as the line that Rachel Maddow just read to you. This was an excellent speech, but what strikes me is that what she said, talking about herself being a child of the civil rights movement, her parents taking her to marches in a stroller. She described growing up and watching her mom work out the bills and figure out how to buy her first home and stand at that Formica yellow table. She described a middle-class upbringing, an approachable upbringing that people can relate to, a relatable person who talked about working for the people. She talked about her biography a bit. But I think what really struck me was not just the delivery of the speech, which to Rachel's point was very well done. The setting was iconic, with that cinematic look where you could sort of see the Capitol blurred behind her, the sort of beauty of the vision of it. But we stand at the brink of potentially electing our first woman president. We stand at the brink of doing something that Liberia was able to do, that Pakistan was able to do, that Israel, that England, but that we have not done, that Mexico just did. That we stand at the brink of that. And for the 75,000 some odd people who stood at the ellipse, their memories of the ellipse, their vision of the ellipse will not be about January 6, 2021. It will be about being there tonight, listening to the daughter of immigrants say that the tyrant that we should oppose today is somebody who spurns immigrants, despite 2 of his 3 wives being immigrants, is somebody whose closing argument was to attack immigrants, to attack strivers, to attack dreamers, to attack the people who make our country great. And what she says is that America doesn't have to be made great. It is great. And it's great because of all of us. And regardless of party, it's great because of you. And so this ask for the vote, which is the primary job of a political candidate, I think this ask was put in terms that are both inspiring and fundamental to those of us. We children of immigrants, we have a little bit of a rose-colored view of America. We kind of come with it. We're kind of born with it. It's sort of a thing that we get when we come out of the womb of our immigrant parent who came here on purpose. And I think whether you are somebody who came and became an American citizen on purpose, deliberately as an immigrant, or somebody whose lineage goes back all the way to the beginning and its flawed beginning, what Kamala Harris is saying, you're part of that mosaic. And so I think it was both her best speech, it was her most important speech, and the location of it made it literally iconic.
Yeah, and I think the part about the biography is interesting to me because it speaks to something that's distinct here, right? I mean, Joe Biden has one of the longest records in public life of anyone. In fact, he has this crazy sort of bookend, right? Elected at 29 and serving, the youngest possible senator, oldest president, right? And spent decades building this sort of identity and brand, Scranton Joe, middle class, telling that story. Kamala Harris has not had that lifetime in the public eye. She is, she's vice president, is not the president. This sort of biographical question of why are you doing this? What are you in it for? Which she took time, again, 1 week before the election, having run only 100 days, right? In the strangest, wildest campaign that any of us have seen in our lifetime, to take some time to talk about that. I thought that was really interesting and very efficient how quickly and deftly they did that. But it was interesting that, they want to send that message to folks that feel like, I still don't quite know you or what is animating you, Rachel, that this is what's animating me. This is why I'm doing this.
I think they're reading the sort of, what's the phrase we're supposed to use now? That weird anecdata, right? It's not exactly data, but it's sort of more than anecdotes. Yeah. Certainly there are people who are diehard Trump supporters. Certainly there are people who are diehard Kamala Harris supporters. But when it comes to people who are neither strong supporters of either, and they have to decide what they're going to do in this election, whether they're going to vote and who for, you are anecdotally hearing, and a lot of that man of the street stuff, and a lot of those those surveys that allow people to do something other than just check yes or no, that their biggest concern about Kamala Harris is that they don't know much about her. And so even this late in her career, even as she's 60 years old and the serving vice president of the United States and was the attorney general of the biggest state in the country, and she was, senator before she was vice president and all those things. And even as she has been campaigning for these months since President Biden dropped out, they recognize, I think, that people who are wavering and not sure what they're going to do or whether they're going to vote need to know more about her. And so this was her honoring that, meeting that in good faith and not being resentful about it, and not, coming up with a fairy tale about it, but being very real about it. I'll also just say in just very practical and perhaps slightly catty terms that Vice President Harris gives a good speech, but I feel like I know what the cadence and the sort of body language is of a Kamala Harris speech. This actually had a lot more texture to it. She was much less just the practiced Politico here. She was showing humanity, showing a little personality, showing a little humor, showing just a little bit more of a range of emotion for women in the public eye. We all know that the range that you're allowed to express in terms of emotion and animation is about yay wide, but she's expanding beyond what I think has been a very tightly disciplined, buttoned up political messaging strategy and sort of messaging kind of cadence to her voice and everything, where we saw more of her and more of what her sort of the warmth of her personality is like. It's very hard to do without being judged for it in this culture that we have, but I think she did it tonight in a way that was ambitious and effective.